Welcome back to the non-dual lectionary. This is the 17th Sunday after Pentecost in year C. We are getting close to the end of the year, starting off again in year A. Uh, but we've got a good one. I really like this one this week. I think it's a pretty direct teaching, obviously from a different time, a different culture, but we can tease that out, I think. So let's jump into it. It is from Luke chapter 17, verses 5 through 10. We're going to strictly be talking about servants and that's not going to resonate much with us directly, but again, I think it's a pretty a teaching that goes right to the heart of things. So here we go. The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." He replied, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it will obey you. Suppose one of you has a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. Will he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, 'Come along now, and sit down to eat'? Won't he rather say, 'Prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that, you may eat and drink'? Will he thank the servant because he did what he was told to do? So you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, 'We are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty.'" Yeah, so right away, right? I mean, the idea of like, oh, the proper way to treat a servant is to make them work more and, no thanks and all that. Put that aside, right? That's a different cultural context. But what do we have, for us? Like, I mean, I think this is, again, Jesus as teacher, but like straight talking true nature, evoking directly, like right at it. Um, so the first part, like it's kind of in two sections, right? We've got the parable starting in verse 7, but we've got the first part there. So the apostles are saying increase our faith. And that's a good thing, right? The idea that like we should increase faith, even in the sense of, we might use different language today, but the idea of, that we should, more fully trust in true nature, that we should, whatever you want to call it, faith being trust, being, anything that kind of, I think the best way to kind of retranslate faith into this non-dual context is something like trusting, um, or relaxing, right, into true nature, like all the grasping that the psychological self, that the ego self does, especially around things like fear. Um, Faith is like the opposite of that, right? Like the relaxing, the letting go, the surrendering. But in any event, so increase our faith. That's a great thing, right? Um, and Jesus kind of, he doesn't say no, but he also kind of goes at it in a weird way, right? If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, and like, hey, like essentially, like you've both got enough and you don't have anything in a way, right? Because I think what, when a person, when a psychological self says increase our faith or something like that, it's the what Jesus sees through there, right? Is like this is being done to feed that ego, to like as a new spiritual game. And that's something that those of us who travel in those circles, right? That's one of the traps, right? Like you convert the ego into a spiritual ego, right? And Adi Shanti talks about this a lot, of like, yeah, he'd rather have calmed, tranquil egos if you're going to be around egos, but that's not actually the point, right? So, increase my faith, myself, my small self's faith. That's not the point there, right? And so Jesus kind of says, by the way, you don't need much, you know, like relaxing into true nature means everything, but also like you don't have any in a way, right? But then, and I love that by itself, right? But then the second part of this, ooh, really beautiful, I think. So the message here being something, right? Hey, like, hey, when you are lit, yeah, I mean, let's cut right to the end, right? Because when you're living out of true nature, you're not doing it. And this fits back with that first part, right? You're not doing it to inflate yourself. You're not doing it to build something. You're not doing to mollify your psychological self or to make it into a better self, than it was. That's the arena of psychology and therapy and ethics and and success and the whole world. And there can be better ways to do that and worse ways to do that, right? Maybe. I mean, from the perspective of true nature, it all fits, right? But since we do operate in the world, yeah, I'm gonna take a strong position here. There are better ways to do that and worse ways to do that. There are, ways that increase suffering, make it more difficult for other people to live out their nature, and there are ways that, smooth the way for yourself and others. Anyway, coming back, right? What do we have then, right? It's, if you're doing this to get something out of it, right? If you're doing this because you're hoping, I'm going to get thanked, right? Uh, Jesus is like, no, that's not what's going on here, right? When you've done everything you told us to do, you say, we've only done our duty, right? Because when you're living out of true nature, it's just doing. It's just doing. It's just living, going where life is. And I don't mean figuring out where life is and then going there, right? It's just like the going and where life is all just a movement of like what is and what is being, right? And what is becoming and all of that. It's just what is. And so like this story here, right? Again, the context is probably a little weird to us, right? But it's in a way that I think helps in the end, right? Because it can shake us out of our comfort if we can read it with like fresh eyes. Hey, when somebody comes in, you say, no, you just do what you do. That's what you do. That's what true nature does. It does what it does. And your task is just to do what you do, right? So Jesus is speaking to that part in the disciples, right? In the first part and the second part. And that's how they fit together, right? I'm not trying to increase your faith, you psychological self. I'm not trying to get you, the point isn't that you get something that you get thanked for or lauded for or anything. The point is to recognize, right? The point is that the faith is actually something that arises from that which is trusted itself, from that inside you that already is faith, that is the faith and the faithing, and that just does what it does. And then when you're there, you don't have to, at that point, think to yourself like, oh, am I doing it right? Or, is somebody going to thank me? And all that like goes away. It's irrelevant, right? It doesn't matter because living out of true self just living out of what is. And so I think that's what this story points to really quite directly. And it's awesome that way.